This is Aliens Fireteam Elite. We're on Xbox Series X, taking a look at this cooperative alien shooter. So what we're getting here is up to 4K resolution at 60 FPS, no HDR support, no crossplay, but it does support cross-gen play. So I was playing on the Series X, and my pal Kevin here, he does a number of videos with me, was playing on the original Xbox One. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about that experience, or well, I'll be able to pass along some of the details I was told from his perspective, just in regards to some of the connectivity and things like that that we'll be talking about throughout this video. So first off, this is an aliens game. You are going from room to room shooting aliens, and there are some other surprises that you'll see in the video as well. So this is a fairly straightforward game, and while it is quite visually impressive, the game is quite shallow. It is about under 5 hours, I would say, to finish the entirety of the core experience. Probably more around 4 based on, you playing with real players. We had 2 players we were allowed. Didn't have an extra code, so we had to use an AI fill-in in order to play. I mean, you could play it by yourself, I guess you could say, but it really is meant to be played in co-op. It is a cooperative experience. And yeah, it's very, very straightforward. You basically go from room to room shooting aliens. A lot of the time, you'll shoot through 1-2 rooms, and then you'll get to a room where it's like, okay, we need to defend against waves. And then you put up your turrets, you put up your defensive little drone thingy that gives you extra damage, and you sit there and you shoot things. And then you have to survive another wave, and then you go past that, and you shoot through a couple more rooms, and then you do another survival thing, and that's basically what the experience is. The most exciting and the only different level was one where you had to shoot these little explosive canisters that came down from the ceiling. You blew those up, and honestly, that was the most unique level in the game. That's not to say this isn't fun. It was an enjoyable experience, but it was very minimal and very repetitive. It also felt a little grindy at times, because you're literally just sitting there killing hordes and hordes of aliens, which in concept sounds quite fun, but when you've grinded through a few thousand, I think I killed 4,000 aliens myself going through the campaign one time over, because we were checking and comparing kill stats and whatnot. His wasn't actually even tracking at all, which is kind of funny. Again, not a knock on the review at all, because achievements, I don't really necessarily factor those into my score. But yeah, just something to keep in mind. It's just sort of like you just kill tons of things, and it's not just aliens. There is a little bit of variety in the enemies, and they do play around with the concept of having these 3-way battles going on. And at the same time, these 3-way battles were very minimal. You don't see them a whole lot. One level's aliens, one level's, again, I hope I'm not spoiling anything for anyone, but you fight some synths, and then you fight these other like polyp type pathogen creatures. And it's very rare that you see everything kind of mismatch when you're fighting. It's just sort of really straightforward and really kind of bland in that regard. There isn't much to this gameplay wise. I think there is an element of replayability in the sense that, hey, you want to go after higher difficulties, you can do that, and you can improve your character's like strength, because there's a little bit of an RPG system, and I'm going to talk about that a bit later on as well. But yeah, you're basically just going room to room shooting things over and over and over again. And by the end of the game, you're just kind of like, wow, this is getting really repetitive, and it feels, again, very shallow. I wish there was more to this. It just feels a little underwhelming. It's like a very okay game. It's very alright. And at the same time, like visually, it looks fantastic. It really does. It captures the aliens well. The Marines look cool. There's some shots where I've got these like 6 shades going on. The different creatures you fight are kind of like spooky. You get some dark rooms. You get some cool backdrops. It's also just 100% linear, and there's not really any difference when you replay an area. It's not like, hey, go this way this time, or this way, that way, or nothing changes up. It's the exact same thing. So if you fail, and that's where we failed, I think 1 or 2 times in the campaign on standard difficulty, always right at the end, and all the levels are about 20 minutes long, give or take. And you die at the end, and you'd have to redo the whole level from the beginning, and it felt super like bland at that point. It was just like the same thing over and over and over again. I just want to really cut that in there, that while this game looks really cool, it is so repetitive. And there's these really weird stutters, and I'm assuming it's like a loading thing. So when you're regularly fighting the aliens, as you've been seeing, hopefully, you know, there's no issues. It's smooth, it runs really well. But you'll get to these points where you're kind of going in towards the next room, and I'm assuming it's quickly loading in the next area. So you get like this just stutter where everything kind of halts for like half a second. It wasn't that bad on my platform, but I did notice one scenario where I was like, oh, we could have been screwed in this one hallway where we weren't moving. And my console, a lot faster. Kevin's there, you know, basically he was just frozen in midair for a bit, and I was like, did he disconnect? And it was just kind of like, what's going on? And then all of a sudden he started playing again while I'm fighting like a horde of aliens, because the game is like just paused basically for him. Loading is decently fast for next gen because this is optimized, but for last gen it is quite slow. There were a lot of moments where my loading screen would be like frozen at like 75%, waiting for his to catch up, and then it would just jump into the match. Because, you know, I could kind of do the comparison of me doing a solo run versus playing with him, and it'd be like, oh, okay, so this is like basically just, you know, an instant pop-in almost. You just get right into the match. And I'm not saying there is pop-in individuals. I didn't actually really notice any. And that's mostly because you're in interior rooms going from area to area. There are like 1 or 2 exterior type areas, but most of it's inside, which is, you know, atmospheric. It wasn't really a scary game. It was more like action oriented, where you're just shooting things over and over again. The scariest part was the opening sequence, and I kind of showed that off in the beginning of the video. And you're just going from room to room, shooting things over and over and over again. Now, outside of the campaign, and we did mention the replayability for different difficulties if you wanted to, I personally feel like it would be very bland and boring to go through it a second time or a third time. But anyways, outside of that, there is like a single horde mission where it's just kind of an endless thing. That level's really well done, but it's not like it's also shallow. Like there isn't much to it, and I don't know if there was maybe other missions we somehow didn't unlock. We did like a few like wave attempts at it or whatever. We survived a number of ways, and we're just like, okay, that's it. And it's just aliens, it seemed, and I don't know. It's just like, okay, this kind of feels a little lately tacked on to try to add a little bit extra value to things, and I was just kind of like, huh, not really a whole lot going on in this game. It is like very much a like AA or even really kind of a leaning indie type of experience that has been shined up to that high tier visual level, and I'm just saying, like, it's all right. Like, it's okay. If it looks like something that you'd have fun with, I'm sure you'll have fun with it. I'm just not necessarily seeing a whole lot of value out of this one. It's like, it's okay to have not necessarily the longest campaign, because I don't know what other scenarios you do other than, you know, kind of the setup of us going through room over and over again. But I'm just saying, it's like, it's okay to do that if you have like extra content. It seems like it would lean its way nicely to having like a PvP type mode, or PvP VE mode would be kind of neat, you know, fighting another team while there's aliens and stuff in the backdrop. That might be neat. But yeah, no, it's just straight up a quick campaign, and then the horde mode and the horde map, I guess you could say, it's not even really much of a mode, and it's just kind of like, oh, there's nothing to this. And even like visually, there's not really cinematics. You like go and talk to a couple people and their mouths don't even move or anything. It's just like, huh, this feels very low budget, which is a shame, because I think, you know, aesthetically they've perfectly captured the Aliens universe. It looks pretty cool, right? I mean, from the different things I've shown off in the backdrop here, I hope you've been kind of seeing that, hey, no, this looks pretty neat, you know, like it's pretty sharp, and it does have some neat RPG mechanics, which I will be getting to and talking about in just a sec. But yeah, no, it's got like a neat style to it. If you've watched the movies, you'll be like, oh, cool, this is, you know, definitely reminiscent of things I've seen in the franchise. That's nice. So it seems like it was a labor of love in that regard, but it also doesn't make up for the fact that it's a very bland, sort of boring game, which is a shame, because, you know, co-op games like this is pretty cool, or are pretty cool, and it's like, it's a 3-player co-op, which is kind of neat. I think that works well. I was just thinking throughout, I was like, they pack the aliens, and I love how the aliens move too. They go on like the walls, they go on the ceiling. It's really quite neat. But I was also thinking, it's like, if we dropped last gen consoles, we might have actually gotten like an extra player, or maybe there could have been more, like double or triple the aliens would have been neat. I don't know. You get what I'm saying. It just kind of feels held back by being like a bit of a cross-gen title. And with that cross-gen-ness, we did have a number of connectivity issues. it seemed that it was mostly on Kevin's console. I didn't have any connection problems, but it was mostly him connecting with me. I could always connect with him and, you know, stuff like that. But there were scenarios where it's like we'd start a match together, and I would be in the match by myself once we loaded in, or, you know, I wouldn't be able to invite him to my squad even though, you know, he disconnected at the end of another one or something like that. So that's something that could persist between the cross-gen. I don't really know. I typically wouldn't mention this type of thing if it was like a one-off type of thing, but no, this happened quite a few times while we were going through this, and it was a bit tedious to deal with, but it seemed like if you're on the next-gen consoles, it's not a problem at all, the connectivity stuff, but I guess, I don't know, maybe it's just a console thing. I really have no idea. They are just weird, and since it was reoccurring, I thought it was worth, you know, bringing up to at least talk about. So let's move on to the RPG type mechanics. So you make your own type of marine, male, female, whatever. You get some slight customization options. It's actually, you know, decent for customization. You're basically just this generic marine, and they talk and they do the story thing in the backdrop while you're just kind of there fighting, going from checkpoint to checkpoint. It actually kind of feels a little bit like Left 4 Dead, you know, like that type of game. But it also has that like Gears of War play style. And I'll talk about the cover system because it's kind of pointless. But anyways, RPG wise, there's lots of different in-game things you can unlock, and you actually earn everything. You know, like you get points from playing, so you can get like different gun skins or weapon skins. You can get different perks. It's got like a really cool sort of perk tree that you get these certain slots, and as you level up the different classes, because there's a few different classes, it actually would have been really helpful for us to have like a doc class, and I think you got to play around with that with your friends, kind of seeing who takes on different roles, because that might be helpful. We were just generic gunners, and we just gun through it, but you know, there are different options, and the classes have different abilities. And then the perk tree, you put in these different like slottable things, so you kind of get like this grid where you have to like slot in these perks, and I thought that was really cool because you're basically, you know, you have to work with what you got there, and you can buy these different perks in game and different visual things, and you can find different like some secret caches. There's not really any collectibles or anything, at least that I could find when I was looking around. It was basically just straightforward gameplay, very, very linear. But yeah, I got these 6 shades. I bought these in-game like orange coloring skin things, and again, just points, not microtransactions or anything, just points that you earn while playing. Same with like modifications. You can have a few different attachments for your guns. You get your 2 guns here, and then there's different weapons. You can have like a flamethrower if you want, but I was pretty comfy with the shotgun assault rifle combo. It seemed to work for me. There was like a burst fire gun too. You know, you get a variety of different weapons you can use in that regard. And then you get extra consumables that you can bring in as well. Again, in-game purchases. When we were doing our last mission, we kind of like loaded up on kind of these extra turrets and whatnot to help us out just in case something happened. And you can find turrets in that in-game too. You find them in crates and everything. So that's kind of the thing. You got a couple of abilities, you got your weapons. The HUD's really clean. I quite like the HUD. It looks good. It tells you where the enemies are, important enemies, whatnot. That's quite well done. So I'm going to talk about the cover system. When you're fighting the aliens and the contagions or whatnot, you really don't need the cover system because they move so fast. There's no point to it. It seemed like the AI in that would use the cover system well, and it's kind of like, well, you know, the things move so quickly. It's like I don't really get a chance to cover. There's not really rooms where there's cover. The cover only really helped with the synths, and even then I felt like it was really unnecessary to have. Like, it's cool, but there's not really any scenarios where it's like the cover could even be, you know, effective for you or even helpful. It's just kind of like, oh, okay. You know, it's just kind of a cover system that doesn't really do much or add much to the game. It doesn't really assist me. I don't know, I was just kind of like, okay, cover, cool, and it was just like, we never really used it at all throughout the game. But anyways, overall, it's alright. It's okay, it's nothing special. It's not something that I would necessarily sit here and I really think play more of. I kind of got my fill of it, which I think is a bit of a shame, and I think, yeah, hopefully you've been seeing those pauses where it just kind of like you go into different rooms, just pauses, but yeah, it seems kind of well crafted. I mean, there's not really any true issues performance-wise or gameplay-wise. It runs fine. There's just not much to it. It's not very complex. You know, I expect a little bit more out of games these days, whether that's in extra modes or better replayability, you know, something like that. And I'm actually a firm believer, not every game needs to have unlimited replayability, but I think games like this need to have a little bit more value to them, because I just kind of look at it and I kind of feel that this is a bit bland or soulless. There's just not a whole lot going on, and that's a shame because the game looks really cool. It's fun. I don't even mind the totally generic soldier. I think it fits into the whole Aliens brand, in my opinion. Having someone that just kind of like trucks through everything with cool aviators or, you know, different hat designs and whatnot. That's kind of neat. I really didn't have any issue with that. Oh, and sometimes you see enemies pop, like, load in and stuff, but it's not too often. Immersion-wise, it does a pretty good job, but yeah, at the same time, it wasn't very scary. But I mean, it's a shooter. It's a pretty generic shooter. You're just shooting things. So I mean, it's not necessarily going to be spooky. And I wish they would have played up with that a bit more, because in the beginning, it was kind of a cool vibe, you know, vents coming down. I was like, cool, but then there's like 500 aliens on the screen, and you're like, oh, now it's just an action shooter. And that's what it is, and that's fine. I think if they add combat, like there's challenge cards, so you can kind of change up how you fight, but like, unless there's some bigger variety changes in the map layouts and the map designs, it's really straightforward. Straight up linear shooter that you can finish in, you know, number of hours, and then you're done with it. And it's just alright, but also underwhelming, I would say.